my pet peeves when people send me pictures of flowers to identify is they don't put anything in the picture for scale. So it's hard to get an idea of, how big things are. So I put this montage together of this lemon lily that I'm very familiar with. I nicknamed it the grandfather lemon lily. And it actually has its own website. So if you look on the internet for grandfather lemon lily, you can see the whole story behind this. But you can see this lily's about 6 feet tall. That's the maximum, about the maximum height the lemon lily gets. But then you can also see in the background of these photographs some more lemon lilies in a whole range of sizes. So throughout this talk, you're going to hear me say the name lemon lily. But I want everybody to be aware that what I'm talking about is a native plant whose scientific name is Lilium parryi. So if you go again on the internet and do a search for lemon lily, you may come across a different exotic plant species, and that's not what we're talking about. So I don't want people to get confused when they hear me say lemon lily. I'm speaking about Lilium parryi. In the literature, you might see a reference to a Lilium parryi variety Kessleri. In 1923, Robert Kessler collected some lemon lilies in the San Gabriel Mountains. Then in 1924, Dr. Anstruther Davidson took a look at these, and he thought they would look different than other lemon lilies. So he proposed a new variety of lemon lily that he called variety Kessleri in honor of Robert Kessler. Since then, botanists have taken a look at these, and they've determined that there's nothing unique at all about this variety. So indeed, the variety doesn't exist. So currently, there are no recognized varieties or subspecies of Lilium parryi. But if you're reading the literature, you might come across that name. There are two distinct regions where lemon lilies grow. One is in the mountains of Southern California. That includes the San Gabriel Mountains, the San Bernardino Mountains, the San Jacintos, and I'm including the Santa Rosa Mountains in the San Jacintos, and in Palomar. In Arizona, they occur in the Santa Rita Mountains, in the Huachuca Mountains, and they once grew in the Chiricahuas. Those haven't been seen since 1994, following a forest fire in the Chiricahuas. So they're presumed to be extinct in the Chiricahuas now. There's another population in the Sierra de los Ajos, which is just across the border from southeastern Arizona there. So this distribution looks rather odd in that you have two distinct populations that are separated by 500 miles of desert. So we can imagine that many thousands of years ago, when the climate was much cooler and wetter in the Southwest, that lemon lilies grew across the entire Southwest. Now that the climate has gotten hotter and drier, they've become isolated atop the mountain ranges in these two areas. When we did our surveys of lemon lilies in the San Jacintos, we mapped every occurrence that we could find. Here's Idyllwild, and the largest number of lemon lilies that are here in Tahquitz Valley, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later. There may be a caveat to this, as I'm going to describe in a minute. This is where we actually went and looked for them, so that might be skewed a little bit. But you can see that lemon lilies grow all throughout the San Jacinto Mountains here. So you might also see in the literature recently, some references have claimed that lemon lilies grow in the mountains of northern Baja California. I looked at this up, and it seems to have originated from a Wikipedia article in 2015. I communicated with botanists on both sides of the border, and nobody has seen, taken a picture of, or collected any lemon lilies in Northern California. So I have not seen any hard evidence that they actually, Northern Baja California. So I haven't seen any evidence that they actually grow there. However, the consensus is that the mountains in Southern California and in Northern Baja have some very similar habitats. And in fact, they do share a lot of the same flowers or same plants. So it wouldn't be unusual for them to be found there. But I'm not ready to concede that they're actually there until I have some more evidence. Lemon lilies grow on the upper elevations of the mountains. In Arizona, they grow between 5,500 feet and 7,500 feet. In California, they grow roughly between 4,000 feet and 9,000 feet. This is prime habitat for lemon lilies. You have a cold mountain stream, plenty of water. They grow right along the banks of these. This is a very busy slide, so I'm not going to go over the entire thing, but I just wanted to point out that lemon lilies are not on the endangered species list. But if you look at the conservation status of different agencies that rate such things, you'll see that they use terms like imperiled or threatened or vulnerable. And in the California Native Plant Society ranks it as rare, threatened, and endangered in California and elsewhere. Since lemon lilies were discovered in 1876, they've suffered greatly at the hands of people. People have cut and pulled up the flowers. People have dug up the bulbs. Where logging has occurred, it's caused a lot of erosion and damage to the riparian habitats where they grow. Mining has also caused a lot of erosion, and particularly in Arizona, it's hard to go any place where there hasn't been a mine at one time or another. Urbanization has also caused the loss of habitat. Grazing is no longer allowed in the San Jacintos, but at one time the cowboys used to run their cattle up from San Jacinto there, Hemet, San Jacinto, up into the meadows in the San Jacintos and then back down the other side. And so from grazing and trampling and erosion, they've suffered from that as well. Forest fires have been in the landscape of lemon lilies forever. So no doubt that they're adapted to some fires, but recently, as you may be aware, there's been an increase in the number and the severity of fires, forest fires, and we don't know yet what effect that's going to have on the overall health of the lemon lilies. Climate change may also cause a reduction in the riparian habitats. And it may be that as the climate warms up, this upward migration of lemon lilies will continue to occur until they run out of real estate at the top of the mountain. So they may become doomed in the long term from climate change, but in the short term, they've suffered far worse at the hands of people than they have from climate change. In 1902, Harvey Monroe Hall published a flora of the San Jacinto Mountains. And he spoke quite a bit about lemon lilies in the San Jacinto Mountains. And he listed the plants that were common in the riparian areas. And he actually listed lemon lily as one of the most abundant. And when we were doing surveys in the San Jacintos, that's not what we were seeing. So he goes on to describe what they looked like. And he said that they were a favorite of the tourists and campers who visited the mountains. And that it was only a few years before then that he could find them along all the streams and bogs in the mountains. Again, this was not what we were seeing. So I spoke to people in Idyllwild and asked them if they'd ever seen a lemon lily. And very few people even in Idyllwild today, know what a lemon lily is. He continued to say, while it is now by no means rare, still it is found in profusion only on the more remote parts of the mountain. That this is due entirely to the diligence of the bulb hunters is hard to believe, and yet one party took over 5,000 bulbs in a single season. Now, this tragedy is made even worse by the fact that they're very hard to grow out of their native range, and so very few, if any, of these lemon lilies that were taken out of the mountains and sold to people in the flatlands survived. In 2009, I wondered if it was still true what Harvey Monroe Hall said, that lemon lilies could still be found in the remote areas of the mountain. So I enlisted Tom Chester and some of our friends, and we set out to count every lemon lily that we could in Willow Creek and Tockwitz Creek. We counted, and here's a map showing Tockwitz Valley. Idyllwild is here on this by the highway here, and Palm Springs is down here at the bottom of Tockwitz Canyon. We counted 2,662 lemon lilies in the two creeks, and a total of about 3,000 lemon lilies in the entire valley there. So what's the significance of that number? Well, NatureServe Explorer estimated that there were only 2,000 to 3,000 lemon lilies in all of Southern California, and we counted that many in this one valley in the Jacintos. So you might ask then, why the discrepancy in what we found and what NatureServe said? Well, it turns out it's really hard to count lemon lilies. First of all, they're found in really remote areas where few people are willing to venture. They blend in with the native habitat, the lush habitat growing in the riparian areas, and so they're hard to see unless they're in bloom. Small juvenile plants that are very small and don't have any flowers are often overlooked because they're hard to spot, and the numbers of lemon lilies vary from year to year. So depending on what year you decide to do your count, there'll be a big difference in the number of plants that you see. So here you can see this lemon lily buried away in the ferns here. If it weren't in bloom at this time, you probably wouldn't have seen that one and counted it. You can see here there's a lot of very small little lemon lilies, and unless you get down right in with them and try to separate them from the sedges that are growing there, you would miss counting them. It was too difficult to do that entire survey every year, so we didn't attempt to do that. But what we did was we picked out a small area in the range, and we went back several years, and we looked to see what difference we could see in the number of plants from year to year. On this axis, we have the number of plants, and on the bottom axis, we have the number of flowers. So we counted how many plants we saw, and we counted how many flowers were on each plant. So we can see from this graph that the numbers of plants from year to year varied greatly. Also, we noticed from this graph that most lemon lilies only have between 1 to 2 flowers. And it's very rare that we saw lemon lilies with a large number of flowers. So the literature says the lemon lilies can have up to 31 flowers. And we weren't seeing anything that was close to 31 flowers. And I was beginning to doubt that they actually do have that many flowers. But then Lorena Van Sant, a biology tech in the San Jacinto, got this photograph of a lemon lily, and this one had 51 flowers and buds, which is far more than what the literature states exist in lemon lilies. You might also notice here in this pattern of leaves at the base of this lemon lily. It's a pattern of circular leaves, and those are called whorled leaves, W-H-O-R-L-E-D. This is distinct for lilies. So if you see this pattern of leaves in the forest, you know that you have a lily, because there's nothing else that has leaves like that in our mountains. You may not know what kind of lily it is unless there's a flower, but you know for sure that that's a lily. Lemon lilies are geophytes, which mean they grow from a bulb under the ground. Now, this is the lemon lily bulb, but it doesn't look what you might typically think a bulb would look like. It doesn't have an outer coating like an onion bulb. It's made up of these little segments, and each one of these segments then has the potential to grow into a new lemon lily. But they're very fragile because they have no coating on them, so they're not protected. If they get too hot and dry, they desiccate and die. If they get too cold, they freeze and turn to mush. And if they get too wet and hot, then they rot away. And so this is probably the reason they're so difficult to grow outside of their native habitat. We can also see in this picture some of the different kinds of roots they have. These are the feeder roots. Of course, plants have roots that develop transport nutrients to the above ground growth. But we also see these really strange looking thick roots here. These are called contractile roots, and that's what pulls the bulbs from the surface down into the underground. And here's a picture of one of those little bulb scales actually growing into a new lemon lily. But sexually, lemon lilies do grow from seeds. This is what a lemon lily seed looks like. At the bottom of my hand there, you can see the seed capsule, and the seeds are just stacked like coins within that capsule. The first year, the lemon lily seedlings just appear as a single leaf above the ground. At this point, they're very vulnerable. So many, perhaps none of these in any particular spot will survive unless they just happen to find themselves into an optimal habitat for them to continue to grow from year to year. So again, the first year the seedlings are just a single leaf and they're very slow maturing. So in the second year, they may appear as 2 or 3 leaves, like this photo on the left. And after the third year or so, they'll start to produce an above ground stem. So it may take 3 or more, possibly even more years for a lemon lily to grow from a seed until it has flowers. In fact, if it's not found in optimal habitat, it may continue to grow but never produce a flower in its lifetime. We know of one lemon lily that I've nicknamed the Munchkin lemon lily, that we think is at least 20 years old, and we see it repeatedly year after year, but it has never bloomed. That lemon lily also has its own web page. So if you look up Munchkin lemon lily on the internet, you can see the whole story behind that lily. So here's our big grandfather lemon lily again. This is when it's first beginning to appear. This is about mid-April, beginning of May. Even at that early stage, the plant has all of the leaves and buds that it's going to have for the entire season. Lemon lilies are not like some plants, which if they lose flowers, they can actually be stimulated to grow more flowers. If something happens to damage the lemon lily or these bulbs, any one of these little buds, it will not produce a flower for that year from that bud. Even though they're slow maturing, they're very fast. They grow very quickly. So this is the grandfather lemon lily again, about 2 or 3 weeks after the initial photograph that I showed. And you can see that the leaves now are beginning to spread out. You can see that whorled pattern of leaves and all the little buds on the top beginning to grow. Eventually, the buds continue to enlarge, the flower developing inside of them, and they separate out into, with their pedicels attached to the main stem. Lemon lilies bloom in Arizona between May and June. In California, they bloom in July and August. But it's really hard to predict exactly when they're going to bloom, and it's influenced by climate or the weather from year to year and the elevation. So, for example, lemon lilies in the lower elevations of the Jacintos following a warm winter may actually start to bloom in the end of June. So lemon lilies in lower elevations will bloom before lemon lilies in higher elevations. Lemon lilies following warm winters will bloom earlier than lemon lilies after a colder winter. Lemon lilies are one of the most fragrant plants in the mountains. You can often smell them before you even see them. Not too surprising then. It's believed that lemon lilies are pollinated by hawk moths, but it's not really well documented. This can be traced back to, and in fact, in Arizona, the literature says that the pollinator for lemon lilies is unknown. But in California, it can be traced back to a paper written by a graduate student in 1956. And that's the only reference that I could find as to how they decided that lemon lilies were pollinated by hawk moths. This seemed unsatisfactory to me. You know, as scientists, we like to be able to replicate and verify data, but apparently I'm not a very good scientist because I wasn't willing to sit out all night in a mosquito-infested creek and wait to see what comes to pollinate the lemon lilies. So instead, I went on the internet and looked for all kinds of pictures of hawk moths, which I found, but I couldn't find any pictures of hawk moths pollinating or visiting even a lemon lily. So I mentioned this to Jennifer G., who's the director of the James Reserve in the San Jacinto Mountains, and she set up a camera trap. And in 2013, lo and behold, at night, she photographed a hawk moth visiting this lemon lily. And she actually has a couple of different photos from different nights of hawk. I don't know if it's the same hawk moth or different hawk moths, but it's definitely visiting this same flower. As far as I know, these are the only photographs of hawk moths pollinating lemon lilies that exist today. But the camera trap also caught hummingbirds visiting the lemon lilies during the daytime. So I don't know what part, if any, hummingbirds play in the pollination of lemon lilies, but they definitely do feed on them. And we see all kinds of little critters crawling around on lemon lilies while the flowers are open. Here's some little beetles that are crawling around, and I believe these beetles are actually feeding on the pollen. Again, if they contribute to the pollination process, I don't know. Occasionally, we'll see one of these crab spiders in a lemon lily. The interesting thing about the crab spider is that they change colors to yellow when they're occupying yellow flowers like lemon lilies or goldenrod. And they do that by secreting a yellow pigment from the inner cells of their body to the outer cells of the body. And then later in the season, when they leave those flowers, they'll lose that yellow color. It's very strange for a spider to actually change its color to be able to camouflage itself while hunting for prey inside a flower. If the flower does get pollinated, and the pollen reaches the ovary, which is at the base of the flower, as you can see here. The ovary will begin to enlarge, start to become upright, as you can see on the left-hand photo here. And then on the right-hand photo, the fruit continue to get bigger and the seeds develop within the fruit. Later, towards the end of the season, you can see here on the left where the fruits are fully developed. And on the right, at the very end of the season, the stalk is dried out, the leaves are all wilted, and the seed capsules begin to split open, and the seeds fall to the ground and plant lemon lilies for the following season. So that's all I had to say about lemon lilies on this talk. If you want to learn more about lemon lilies, we put a lemon lily fact sheet on Tom Chester's website. I encourage anybody who's interested to look this up. You can do a search for Lilium parryi lemon lily fact sheet, and it should pop right up. And there's more information on this fact sheet than you probably would ever want to know. So we'll turn this back over to Pam.
Okay. Oh, it's super interesting. I put one question in there. So is it possible that Bob's hiking group up to Talkie Peak, is there any spot that they should be looking on the way for those?
Well, what trail are you going up? There are none on the South Ridge Trail if that's where you're going up.
No, we're not.
Bob?
We're going up Devil's Slide that way.
Okay. When you're going up the Devil's Slide Trail, you'll get to Saddle Junction, and then to go to Talkwitz Peak, there's a turnoff to the right. But if you continue on, instead of making that right-hand turn, if you go about another mile, you'll enter a big meadow full of ferns, bracken ferns, and there are some lemon lilies there. There was one year where they got completely wiped out by gophers, but I think some of them have recovered there. So it depends, of course, on when you go. It'd probably have to be late July or early August for you to see them there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we go out there quite a bit. That trail that you're talking about, I think it heads out towards. Actually, if you keep following that trail, that'll take you to the tram.
Yeah, and then if you continue on that trail, it crosses Willow Creek, and there's some lemon lilies in Willow Creek there.
That's the name of the trail, Willow Creek Trail. Yeah.
So that's a good place to see them. It's up there.
Okay, well, we'll start looking for them for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and if anybody wants to just pop in with a question.
Oh, there's one other. Tomorrow,
I'll see if I can.
Tomorrow we're going up there, and we're going to be heading north on the PCT. Is there any place up that way?
Well, it'll be too early tomorrow.
Okay.
They'll be there, but they won't be in bloom yet.
Okay,
If
gotcha.
you have really good eyesight and you know what you're looking at, you might see some like this on the left here where they're in bud, though.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Well, I'll
They
keep an eye
won't
out.
have the conspicuous yellow flowers yet.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay. So, let's see. I'm trying to get the screen so I can see if there's anybody that has their hand up, or why don't you just pop in if you have a question, if anybody has any questions. I guess you answered everybody's questions. Yeah, that was very nice. Very, very nice. Such a unique, gorgeous plant. Okay, well, if anybody wants to ask anything, this is your last chance. Otherwise, we're gonna sign off. I see that everybody's saying it was a nice presentation, was really complete. So I think it left really very few questions for us to ask. The only question I had was I was trying to find out if there was going to be a lemon lily day up at the nature center or festival day up at the nature center, and I haven't been able to find that out. So that's my.
I started a lemon lily festival in 2010, and we had it for several consecutive years. And it's kind of gone by the wayside. And of course, when COVID happened, it completely stopped. I spoke to Steve Perez, who's the park interpreter at the nature center there. And there are lemon lilies in Lily Creek there by the nature center. He said that he wanted to have a lemon lily day. I think he said it was on June 18th. That seems a little bit early to me to see them in bloom there, but that's another good place to go up to see lemon lilies. There's not a lot of them, but there are a few lemon lilies in Lily Creek there. It's very easy to get to. It's a nice park. There's picnic tables. There's a nature center. So if you don't want to go on a long hike, you can spend a nice leisurely day and possibly see lemon lilies. If you want to go just to see lemon lilies, I would suggest you call the nature center first and ask if they're in bloom though.
Yeah, so there were two questions over here in chat. I didn't see them, but then Jennifer Cole said that don't forget the lemon lily presentation at the Idyllwild Nature Center. So Jennifer, do you know something about that? I'm not hearing from her.
Well, I have given I have given presentations there on lemon lilies, but I'm not going to do one this year. But maybe Steve found somebody else who's going to. Hopefully, I hope so.
Okay. And then Carrie had a question about whether they reproduce by bulbs and seeds or just seeds, or how do they reproduce?
Their primary route of reproduction is by seed, but they can also, occasionally we'll see one where the bulb will split in two, and so it will produce two stalks and then two separate plants. So they can reproduce that way. And also those little individual scales that I showed, they're very loosely attached. And so if they get disturbed, they can break off. And there's the potential for those also to grow into new lemon lilies. But they're very hard to grow. You have to find just the perfect optimal conditions to get them going.
Good. So it looked like Jennifer said she was gonna see if there was something going on. Maybe she'll contact me and tell me, and I could send out a note. So, yeah.
Yeah, if I hear anything, I'll let you know, Pam.
Oh, that'd be great.
I'm in contact with a lot of people still in Idyllwild, and they send me pictures of lemon lilies every year, so I can keep you up to date into what's going on there and send you the latest pictures also.
Oh, good. Okay.
So
great.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you folks about lemon lilies. When I first got interested in it and decided that everybody should know the lemon lily story, I started talking to one person at a time while I was hiking on the trail. And this gives me the opportunity, of course, to reach a bigger audience. And I hope that everybody will pass the word along as well.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, okay, very nice. Bye. Oh, here's one new message here. I'll see. Yeah, okay. I think we're good. Okay, I'll say good night.
Thank you, Pam.
Okay. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Trying to close it out. Night.